So why did I go to jail? I went to jail for a few different things. I've been there a few different times, but my most recent one, I had caught a felony for delivery of heroin. I worded as that I saved somebody's life and I shouldn't have been charged with it. I felt a little salty about it even to this day, but it's also a charge that saved my life. I'm going to kind of go over that story today, and you guys can determine that for yourself. This is Iron Aftercare with Greg, and if you guys are liking the videos, you've been watching them, please like, please subscribe. Let's get into it. So there was a girl, I got charged with this crime January 2nd, 2014. And the year prior to that, I had been going down, me and a group of friends, we were all going to kind of the same dealer, and I was hanging out with a buddy that had a girl with him. And I ended up meeting this girl, and we started talking. She went down to the same dealer that I did, and we just started hanging out every day. I don't think we were like officially dating, but we were pretty much together. And probably for months and months, we were hanging out, and we would go down, pick up heroin every single day. We'd try to find money. We were hitting licks together, stealing stuff together. I mean, we were together for probably about 3 or 4 months before we had like a falling out. She had did something, I don't really remember what it was, but she had did something that pissed me off. I think she ended up stealing something from me. So we stopped talking, and this had to have been like May or June of 2013. So I get a phone call January 2nd. I haven't heard from her ever since then. It had been almost like 6 months since I heard from her. And that text message pretty much said, hey, I'm really sick. She basically, that's, if you've been addicted to heroin, you don't get your heroin, you're sick. So she kind of worded as, I'm really sick right now. I don't have any money. Do you have anything for me? Do you have a wash? Do you have anything? So if you're not familiar with a wash would be like when you cook the heroin in like a little, you can cook the heroin in a spoon or anything, but you have like a little cooker, a little metal cup about this big. When you suck up that liquid with a needle, you have to put a cotton in there just to kind of filter everything out. So then what you're left with is like these stained cotton swabs that contain little bits of heroin. So when you run out of heroin, you can put all these cotton swabs together, put some water in there, squeeze it out, and you'll get like a shot out of that too. So she asked me, like, do you have anything? And at the time, I had come up on some money, so I had enough stuff, and I was like, I always feel bad for somebody who's sick. I know what it feels like. And I didn't have really any ill feelings towards her at that time. So she ended up coming over. I was like, you can have my wash, you can have my cotton swabs or whatever. I had done heroin with this girl 60 times. Not 60 times, like 90 times, every single day for like 3 months. I've seen her tolerance. I've seen what she's done. And generally, like, a wash is not that much, like, it would just barely help me, like, not be sick. It's not going to get me high. It's not going to do anything of that sort. So she comes over, and I give her the cotton swab. She does the wash. She shoots it up. And I'm renting a room at the time, and I see her kind of go out, and she's, like, nodding out. And I've hung out with her enough to know that, like, she's way more fucked up than I've ever seen her. And I'm trying to push her, and I'm trying to, like, wake her up, and I'm saying, hey, like, are you okay? Like, you got to wake up. You got to do this, because she's just kind of nodding out, and it was just very unfamiliar for me. Because, like I said, I had done heroin with her 90 to 100 times before. I know how much she can do. We were getting the same stuff every time. And then all of a sudden, she stopped responding. And I hadn't been hanging out with anybody at that time. I was kind of like a hermit crab. Usually I kept Narcan on me. Narcan's what you can give, opiate users through a shot to save them if they've overdosed. So all of a sudden, I'm kind of like shaking her, and then all of a sudden she just goes limp. She goes limp. I'm trying to get a pulse. She barely has a pulse. She's not responding. She's just dead weight. So now I know that the room that I'm renting right now is probably about like 3 miles, maybe like 2 or 3 miles from the hospital. And I know if I call an ambulance, how long it's gonna take. And I make a split decision like super quick, where I'm like, I'm taking her up to the emergency room right now. Like, I don't know what's going on with her, but she's not responding. I'm not gonna sit here and let her die and wait for an ambulance to show up. I can get her right up to the hospital. I was not in any shape at the time. So for me to carry her, she was probably about like 140, 150 pounds, but it was one of my first times ever having to carry somebody who was literally and figuratively dead weight. And I was on the second story. It was like the second or the third story of the building where I was renting a room. And I put her over my shoulder and I went down the stairs. I barely, like, I was limping, like it was heavy. I barely made it to my car. And I remember trying to get her in the car and I couldn't get her in the car. You know, like her body was just limp. I couldn't do anything. I remember I sat her down on the ground so I could try to like move the seat back and just kind of try to put her into the car. Not even thinking that she was completely dead weight. I sat her on the ground and she fell over and hit her head on the parking lot. And I tried picking her up off the ground. I barely got her into the car, barely got her into like my passenger side seat. And I took off speeding. I mean, I ran red lights. I got to the hospital within like, I don't know, like 60 seconds, like 90 seconds. It was like fast. I was going through all the lights, just trying to get there as quick as I can. I pulled right up to the emergency room and I ran inside the emergency room and I said, I got an overdose victim. I got an overdose. So immediately they came out with the wheelchair. They grabbed her out of my car and then they took her in. And then I was left standing there. Now, I still had like maybe like 2 bags, 2 dime bags on me. So as soon as I seen her push the girl into the hospital, I was like, I have to get rid of this, you know? So I ended up leaving. I went back to my room and I got, you know, I shot what I had left. And my room was a fucking wreck. Like, it was absolutely a fucking mess. I had like, when you went to the needle exchange, you know, the needle exchange is where you get clean needles. If you returned your needles, every time you returned your needles, they gave you the same amount back double. So I got to the part where I was just returning like 2 to 3 boxes, like hundreds. And I must have had like, I don't know, like 300-400 like dirty needles, you know, spread throughout all the place. Like I mean, I had the shit everywhere. I had just paraphernalia everywhere. And I started freaking out. And I was like, I didn't know if she lived. I didn't know if she died. I was freaking out. I ended up grabbing all my needles, everything. I got rid of it. I went down the street and I ended up dumping the garbage like into a garbage can, just freaking the fuck out. So then I went back to my room and then I sat there and I was waiting. And it was not much longer. I don't know how long I was waiting there for. It was like the longest like 2 hours of my life, and I was waiting for the knock, you know? And that knock came. Knock, it's the police department. And I'm talking to them and they're asking me questions, you know, like, where have you been? Like, you know, when you pull up to the emergency room, they're gonna get your plates anyways. So I'm talking to them, I'm telling them like, yes, it was my friend, you know, like, did you drop her off? I'm like, yes, she was with me, she overdosed. And I honestly at the time, I thought everything was fine. You know, like, I knew it wasn't fine, but I thought it was fine. Whereas like, I thought that like, I helped her and that I did something, you know, to like save her life. You know, the last thing that I thought was that I was going to be in trouble. You know, like I thought that maybe I would get in trouble if I had that heroin still on me and I was going to get a possession, but I had already gotten rid of it. They arrest me. They take me downtown. They won't tell me anything. You know, at this time, I thought that, like, you know, I was helping out, you know, that I had brought her there. So now fast forward a little bit, you know, I still don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she's dead. They haven't told me anything. And what had happened was, after I got my paperwork, you know, like I figured out what had happened. So now, when she woke up at the emergency room, I don't know if it's protocol then for like police to start interrogating her. And I don't know if other states are like this, but in this state, Wisconsin, they can actually, you know, I don't know if anybody's actually been successfully charged with it, but they could threaten the charge of like having, what is it called? Like a bodily possession. So which means you had an overdose, you have heroin in your system, and they could charge you for a bodily possession. So what they had done to her and scared her was, you know, we're going to charge you with a felony bodily possession, or you could tell us where you got it from. So she went and changed her story a little bit. You know, like she did say, like, I got it from him. He gave me a wash. And she kind of extended it and kind of made herself look innocent. You know, it's like, you know, basically that I had pushed heroin upon her. You know, that I went over to his house. He's a heroin addict. You know, he wanted me to do heroin. He ended up giving me one of his washes. I didn't know how to shoot up. He shot it up for me. It was this whole extravagant story where I'm like, you know what? Like I hung out with this woman for like 3 months. I seen her shoot heroin for months. You know, like just as bad as an addict as I was. And now she's on, you know, she's on paper saying that, like, you know, she had never done that stuff before. I was a heroin addict that pushed it upon her, and she was a little bit curious. So it set me up as the bad guy. And to make this like situation worse, well, better and worse, kind of, is that her dad was actually the district attorney for the county that we were in. So when it came down to me getting like a public defender, I couldn't have a public defender because it was a conflict of interest. So they had to hire me a private attorney who also did shit anyways. But anyways, I was waiting at the police station. They were asking me like, hey, I know you have heroin. They're interrogating me like I'm a dealer. And I'm going to say right now, just off bat, I have never, the amount of drugs that I've done in my life, you know, I was addicted to drugs for almost, you know, like 9 years. Heroin, crack, everything across the board. I've done everything to get money, you know. But I have never once in my entire life ever sold drugs to anybody for any bit of profit. Ever. I've never sold drugs. You know, maybe some friends have asked me like, hey, can you grab me something? Like, yeah, but I never upcharged them. I never did it to make money. It's just, I don't know why. I've never had an interest in it. You know, like it seemed like a fucked up job to me. I thought, you know, hey, I'm just going to be a user. I don't want that kind of problem. So when they're interrogating me, asking me like, you know, where did you dump the drugs? Like as if I had like a huge like surplus of drugs or something, you know? And this is where they end up telling me like, yes, she's alive. She said that you supplied the drugs for her, that you injected the drugs for her, and that you were the supplier of it, you know? And I denied all of it. And I'm like, this is fucking bullshit, because it was bullshit. And I remember getting so mad with them telling me that we are charging you with delivery of heroin. You know, they didn't have any bags. They didn't have any heroin. They didn't have nothing. You know, like there was nothing. And when I found out that I was getting charged, I was so mad, because I thought that like, you know, I thought that, you know, I don't know what I thought in my head. Maybe at the time I thought, you know, they were going to be like, you know, thank you for saving her life. You know, thank you for taking her here. Because at that time, there's been so many situations like that where like, people had overdosed, you know, with like a group of friends, and they've like just literally dumped the body out the car, literally hid the body in the closet, literally drove around with the body, too scared to go to the hospital. And I didn't think twice about it. I took her there. I didn't think that I was going to get into trouble. Well, anyways, needless to say, I ended up getting charged with the delivery of heroin. And what makes this story even crazier is that, so 2014, January 2nd is when I got locked up. Now, I was in one of the pods, and I was watching TV probably like a month and a half in. I was watching the news. And I think it was like maybe like the beginning of March. They get on the news and they start talking about the Good Samaritan law. And in Wisconsin, in March of 2014, they passed the Good Samaritan law, which means that you, as a drug user, if somebody overdoses at your house or whatever, that you can call 911 and have a responder come out and save that person, and they will look past what's in that surrounding, you know, what's in your area. Meaning, like, let's say they walk in to save your buddy's life who just overdosed next to you, but there's heroin, your heroin's on the table. They're gonna look past that for you saving their life. Same thing goes as if you take somebody in, they're not gonna search you, they're gonna, you know, we're just here to save this person's life. Because it was a huge problem. Like I said before, about kicking people out the fucking car, dumping bodies, like driving around with bodies, too scared to take them to the hospital, and these people are dying. So immediately I'm in there and I'm like, I'm saved. You know, like this is literally my situation. This is exactly what happened to me. So I get to talking to my lawyer, you know, maybe like a week later, I'm able to get a hold of her. I start talking to her. And with this law being passed, you can't get grandfathered into it. So since mine already happened before, now my situation, if my situation had happened, you know, after that law was passed, I would be free. But since it was after the fact and I can't get grandfathered into it, I was literally screwed. And this whole story, you know, this whole thing that happened to me at that time, you know, obviously this last time was my turning point, you know. It's what, you know, I owe my whole life to, like, getting busted right there. Like, who knows what would have happened had this charge not happened. You know, maybe I would have been dead. Maybe I would have got a worse charge. Maybe, you know, who knows what would have happened. So this charge, it saved my life, you know. And the judge at my sentencing, you know, she took in, so they wanted to give me 2 years in. And the judge took into account that the Good Samaritan law was passed and that I couldn't get grandfathered into it, and she spared me. So I had been sitting for about 4.5 months, about 4.5, 5 months. And she sentenced me to 11 months in jail, no time served. And by sparing me, like in Wisconsin, if you get 1 day over a year, you automatically have to go to prison. And since I had no time served, she gave me no time served, all I had to do was 11 months in the jail. So running that with the 4.5 months I already sat for, I was technically going to be sitting for almost 16 months in the county jail by the end of all this. And I look back on it now, and I'm so thankful for that, what she gave me. She gave me, her sentence that she gave me was perfect. She gave me the perfect amount of time. It wasn't like too long to where it could have broke me, and it wasn't too short to where I wouldn't have had time to like make a change that I did. You know, even years later, I still get mad about the charge, you know, and it's like a balancing thing where like I'm mad about the charge, but I'm happy about the charge because the charge changed my life. But I'm mad about the charge because, you know, I did the right thing in the situation, and I saved her. And the whole court thing, like, she still worked with the police. She still, you know, spoke in my case. She still made me look out to be a monster who got her addicted to drugs. And what's crazy now, even like, you know, 11 years later, you know, I look her up from time to time, maybe a few times over the last like 10 years, and she's been in and out of prison. You know, she's right now, as we speak, she's actually in prison for something. You know, I didn't look into details that far, but I'm just glad that her family can see, like, that she is and who was just a piece of shit, you know? How she made me to look out that she was like the good person, that she was like a good person, and, you know, she came into my life, and then I tried getting her addicted to heroin, and whatever story that she spun the courts and whatever story that she spun, you know, her parents and whoever else, you know, that shit pisses me off. It's crazy how that stuff works out, you know? I've never been like a huge believer in, you know, people getting charged with people's overdoses. You know, I would never, the dealers that I was going to, if they sold me legitimate heroin, you know, it wasn't spiked with anything, and I overdosed and died, that was my own choice. You know, and that's how I've always felt. You know, I made that choice. I'm playing a dangerous game with dangerous consequences that could happen. And I don't think it's anybody else's fault except for mine. So I would never want anybody to be charged for my murder for something that I decided to do. I know that's super controversial. You know, I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on that. Even to this day, I still feel that way. If you guys agree, you disagree, like, I'm open for debate in the comments. But the positive thing of this whole story is that, you know, that felony changed my life. You know, I had a lot of minor crimes before that, but catching a felony changes your life. It changes, you know, how hard it is to get a job, how hard it is to get, you know, a place to live, how hard it is to get, like, even car insurance. There's car insurances that wouldn't even take me and drop me, you know, when they found out about my felony for a drug, you know, a nonviolent felony. You know, it changes lives, you know, and the good thing is that it changed my life for the better. You know, it helped it more than it hurt it. You know, whether she was like trying to get me into trouble, try to get herself out of trouble, she really just saved my fucking life, like, plain and simple. And that's a little bit about me. You know, I ended up serving that time. I got out, and now I count my clean time, you know, January 2nd, 2014, when I got busted. I've been clean off of heroin ever since, and it's just been building, you know, building my life back together. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of insight on my last charge. I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on it. Other than that, if you guys like the video, you guys like the content, please remember to like the video. Please remember to subscribe. I love all you guys. I'm out.